Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the University of Nebraska, Omaha. This is a big day here. This is a day that has the campus abuzz and actually the entire city. In town this week as we tape this is a man who you will meet shortly. He was WellCome's, that's Wellness Council of the Midlands, Well Workplace Awards luncheon speaker this past week. He is also being given the dubious distinction of being the face on the barroom floor at the Omaha Press Club, the 89th face, as a matter of fact. And now I'll introduce you to him. You know him well. He is one of our own. He is U.S. Navy Lieutenant Shane Osborne. And Shane, your name has become almost a household word, and certainly since your book came out, Born to Fly, the untold story of the downed American reconnaissance plane. This has been out for how many months now?
It came out in November of 2001, so it's been out a while.
It's been out over a year. Also, there's the Young Readers edition, which is unusual, and I think, what was the decision in making that available?
Well, the reason I did the book was, one, I wanted to be able to tell the world what happened and how great that crew did over there to stick together and what we had to go through. But more importantly was I knew that it would possibly be a good recruiter, and that was why I focused on the young adult edition, to kind of plant a seed, hopefully in some young men and women's minds on service and how important it is to serve your country. So
now I read the adult version, and I imagine that there's a few you know, kind of words that come out in the heat of that,
sure,
that aren't in the Young Reader.
Yes, they're not in the young Readers.
And I must say, in case you've lived in a cave for the past 2 years, what we're really talking about is a flight that started on April Fool's Day, 2001. And take us through that. A beautiful day.
It wasn't a bad day. We'd had bad weather the past week, so it was nice to be able to fly and not worry about getting caught in thunderstorms or anything like that. So
and you were in a kind of bizarre kind of plane, with a funny little belly on it, an additional belly.
It's got a lot of additional parts to it. It's a EB-3E reconnaissance aircraft. It's a crew of 24, and it's not very pretty to look at unless you fly it. Then you kind of find it a handsome aircraft, but it's a very large converted airliner that has a lot of equipment on board and has a lot of external antennas and canoes and all types of things on it.
Well, certainly around this area, we're familiar with the old AWACS and then of course the Looking Glass that flew above the United States for so long, because they flew out of Offutt Air Force Base. But this one is a intelligence gathering tool, but it's signals. They're looking for signals.
It's very similar to the rivet joint, the RJ that flies out of Offutt now. That's the Air Force's version of us, and we often swap off Dave's flying missions in the same areas, so they're very similar.
Now, you'd been on missions around the Middle East, you know, gathering information.
Sure.
This was a mission, and you were flying along the coast of China in international airspace, and you're grabbing information. But in earlier flights, you had experienced what was increasingly aggressive behavior by the Chinese.
Up until this incident, we couldn't even talk about the fact that we were intercepted, but it become the norm to be flying and have Chinese fighters come with missiles under their wings and kind of come out and take a look at you. And they usually weren't too harassing, but they become increasingly more aggressive in the past few weeks leading up to this incident. And you know, there was an international stir prior to this, but they'd never come this close as that day when we had the accident.
They basically came up under your wing, and it's his plane, the Chinese pilot's plane, just self-destructed bit by bit.
It did. He came up under the wing twice and almost hit us, and then the third time he came in and had too fast of a closure rate and pitched up into my left number one propeller on my left wing, and it cut his aircraft in half, and this back half of his airplane went up through my aileron and tore a large hole in my aileron and caused damage to my wing, and then his nose came across and hit our nose and actually flipped us upside down. So
So you're D-nosed, you're upside down, you're going down,
Sure.
spinning around.
It wasn't a spin. It was just an inverted dive, essentially, about 130 degrees with about 50 degrees nose down, which is not a good place to be in when you're in a large airplane like this one. So.
And you really had no idea the extent of damage. And all you could think of was, how long, you don't have a lot of time. You said
Sure.
you lost, I think in the book, and I don't get numbers right. I'm real bad at numbers.
Sure.
Several thousand feet in 30 seconds.
About 8,000 feet upside down.
And you're thinking, this is where the training, this is where
Sure.
all those tough instructors that you had that give you up or down.
Yeah. This is, when we first hit, and it was like driving down a Nebraska washboard, gravel road. The plane just started shaking and coming apart, and I thought for sure we were gonna die at that point. There was a little doubt in my mind when he hit us and then came across and hit our nose and we got flipped upside down that we were gonna be not living to see the end of that day, and it was gonna take a while to hit the ocean. So it was a pretty sickening feeling in my stomach. But coming from Nebraska, we're gonna keep working at things until the end. So I kept the inputs in and tried to get the plane righted. And once we got right side up, about 8,000 feet later, the plane was still in a nose dive. So we lost another about 8,000 feet. We went from 22,500 feet to 8,000 feet before we were flying again. And I called for the crew to bail out, and they all put on their parachutes. And once the airplane flew, I knew ditching wasn't an option with all the damage we had. It was taking full right aileron and full right rudder just to hold the wings level with max power on my remaining engines. And then the far left engine, chunks 2 to 3 feet long were missing from that propeller, but I couldn't get the engine to feather, which would shut down that prop. So it was still spinning, causing a lot of vibration and drag. Not to mention the nose being gone, and my airspeed indicators, which tell me how fast I'm going, they got torn off, and then I lost my altimeter later on.
Not to mention every aircraft is different in terms of the ability to bail out of it safely.
Sure.
And you had all these things wrong with it, and still it would have, even if things had been right and it had just simply become disabled and was going down, it would have still been a dangerous, very, very dangerous, one of the more dangerous crafts to bail out from.
No one would have been able to get out of it because we don't wear our parachutes during the flight. They had to don their parachutes and their helmets. So if we would have been out of control and not been able to at least get it righted, then no one would have been able to get out of it. But
there's all kinds of different air patterns and things around it, even if on a good day.
Well, it'd be tough to get the door open, but
yeah.
we had what we call an explosive decompression. When tore my nose off, it let air into the plane. We were pressurized, obviously, so a lot of wind noise and
and up against
air
the
goes
wall
out of your
for a lot of
lung.
people, yeah.
Yeah, so they were pinned to the floor, and once we were at 8,000 feet and I had the plane somewhat flying, not very well, but I called for the emergency destruction checklist. So this crew in the back that had just been pinned to the floor for 2 miles of a wild ride, and the airplane is noisy and they're scared, they got up and took their equipment and destroyed it and opened up the hatch.
And that's all the sensitive
the
information.
Yes.
Hard drives of computers.
Exactly. And some of the paper material and the highest classified stuff goes first. But, it took a lot for them to kind of gather their thoughts and be able to get up off the floor and know that this plane probably wasn't going to hold together much longer and still do their job.
The interesting thing is that when you were in flight training or when you're, getting the hypoxia treatment and all these things where they're showing you that you can't trust your instincts, or you have to learn how to deal with these things. You
Sure.
have to trust your instruments. You couldn't even trust many
I didn't
of
have
your
many
interests.
instruments left,
Yeah.
but it was a clear day, which made it easier. So I was outside looking, and I knew when I looked up and when we were upside down, and I looked up and
you knew
saw
what
a
was-
fighter flying towards the ground with flames out of it. I knew we were in trouble because
But
we
still,
were
speeds, you weren't
falling.
sure on speeds. And
What I did was we have a GPS system that gives you a ground speed, which in the air, you can have winds. It's not very accurate, but it gave us a guess. And
It's
so
like how far
I
you
had-
travel and what
how
length
fast
of time.
and how fast you're going over the ground.
But
and
landing
so I had
that
people call it
sucker,
out.
landing that, and knowing that you're going into Chinese,
Sure.
airspace, and then going to land on a Chinese island, all that going on in your mind. And I'm sure that to a certain point, once you decided you were going to land that plane or do your best to land it,
Sure.
it really didn't make any difference where you were going. The important
No.
thing was focusing
We had
on.
to get rid of the important material and get it on the deck because it wasn't going to hold together very long. And I knew that prop was out there spinning, and that could have came off at any moment and cut the airplane in half. And that was, there were a lot of problems with the aircraft. So we were trying to call the Chinese over our guard emergency frequency, and nobody would answer.
I'm sure you
That
feel
didn't
now that
surprise
they
me.
did hear you, but they
I'm
didn't
sure
want
they
to
heard,
acknowledge.
they knew we were coming, obviously.
They didn't want to
so,
acknowledge.
Yeah.
So you get this plane down. I mean,
The crew worked well together. My co-pilots and my engineer, Senior Chief Mellows, they did a great job. He'd been in the Navy, my engineer, 28 years when this happened. So he'd been in the Navy 2 years longer than I've been alive. So he had a lot of experience. He'd never gone through anything like this, but we ended up touching down at about 180 knots.
nobody
with
had
no
ever gone
flaps
through
and
anything like that, had they?
Not
Exactly.
in a P3, no.
In fact, that plane, by the book, by what that plane could have taken, probably should never have.
We were lucky. God was
gotten
looking
through
out
it.
for us that day.
So you get down, and the plane is surrounded by what, AK-47s and
Armed
Chinese
troops.
army troops.
And they weren't, they were probably as shocked as we were that we were there, but they surrounded the airplane when I taxied clear of the runway, and I immediately wanted to get a call out over our satellite radio to let the Americans know, our side know that we were alive and no one was injured at that
We have
point.
landed safely.
So that was a big call before we finally zeroized that radio.
And you're kind of stalling, turning off the
Stalling,
engines.
turning off the engines, and
While the
trying to get the
communications guy
calls
gets-
out. Exactly, and they started getting more adamant about us getting the plane shut down. So I didn't want anyone to get shot at that point, so we shut it down.
So that's just the end of the big first chapter. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like a two-part story. Each part
It
is
was.
compelling as the other. You began what you had no idea would be 11 days in, I won't say in captivity, but you were detainees in our parlance
Yeah.
as we hold
That-
people.
That's what. Yeah, there's.
But you were
detainee or
captive.
whatever.
There was no question.
No,
you
there
were
was no
prisoners.
question about it. We were prisoner.
And they went through without physical torture.
Sure.
I mean, out and out, beatings or anything like that. They did all the standard things, hours of interrogation, particularly you, sleep deprivation, little tricks like with holding, email that the general
Sure.
had left when you finally got to see
That
someone
was
from the
later
United
on,
States.
yeah.
But it was. Without going through all, because I think people should read this book, and they may get a
Okay.
chance to see a USA Network movie
So
in the next year.
That might be happening here
they're
shortly.
kind of this
yeah.
close to maybe. Explain what in that first part was like in terms of not knowing.
You're in shock and you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know if you're going to get hit. You don't know if you're going to ever see your family again. You don't know. But all you know is that you have to keep the faith and stick together as a crew and do it how you're trained. And there's been lots of great examples of past military POWs from the Vietnam, Korean, World War II, the Pueblo crew to look up to, and we went through nothing compared to what they did. But that inspired us and let us know that, as bad as things may seem, they could always be worse. So the crew hung in together, and the most important thing was we stuck together as a unit and returned with our honor, which was the most important to all of us.
I think one of the things that you mention in your book is that the self-discipline and working as a family, as a team, pays off. And that's all that training. I mean, you've had training of possible things that could happen
Sure.
to you in a situation like that. You also know what you can and can't say or shouldn't say. And to be fair, that would depend. Everyone is different under extreme.
Sure.
Fortunately, you weren't physically.
You don't know how you're going to react to the situation of the incident in the air or on the ground until it happens to you. You can train, and that's the only thing you can do is train to prepare for it. But
they
you never
did
know your reaction until it happens to you, until you get that gut check. So.
a lot of subtle things to try to lower your morale, to keep you apart at times.
They isolated me from the rest of the crew. They wanted a confession out of me and to take responsibility for the accident, and that was what they were going after with the 7-8 hour interrogations and the sleep deprivation. But I was able to eat with the crew, and we would all get together and get our plates and stand at the table and wait for the last person, then have a nice prayer, and then sit down, and I'd get to eat with them. So I'd tell everybody to eat slow because that was my only time.
But you weren't able to eat
out
with
of the
them for a
room.
while, and they basically
They went on
stayed
a-
together and kind of
sure.
went on a hunger strike.
The next in command, Lieutenant Pat Honig, that's how it works. He took over once I wasn't cooperating. I wouldn't allow them to interrogate the rest of my crew. And
They
so
were punishing you and your team.
Yeah, they took me away and put me in a room and had me sleep all night with guards blowing smoke in my face in a cold room and all types of tricks to try and wear me down. But the crew the next in command just takes over, and that's the way it works. And they did great, and they went on a hunger strike, and the Chinese didn't know what to think of that because they didn't eat for about a day and a half, and then I was allowed after that to eat with my crew.
When you finally were able to meet with the U.S. general, who was the liaison,
General Neil Ciolak, yes.
the liaison, military liaison in China, and he basically intoned to you that the president is standing firm, and all that. What kind was that? That had to have been a watershed mark in your ability to continue.
He had told us that the United States was not going to apologize, and I told him that we had nothing to apologize for, and so that didn't bother us at all. There's no use in return if you're not going to return with your honor. So I didn't want anything to compromise our honor or our dignity to get home and do it right. So,
but really, two important things happened in that meeting.
Sure.
He told you that the U.S. was standing firm, was not going to apologize, and you told him very simply, "We have nothing to apologize for." And
sure.
So even though you couldn't have a lot of other communication, that was speaking a wealth of information to each side,
yes.
to both of you.
Yeah, he knew our status. He knew we were fine. It was 11 days and it wasn't fun, but the crew, as tight as we were even before this happened, it helped a lot. And seeing their faces every day helped me sit through those pretty scary interrogations and threats and all types of accusations. So, all in all, seeing a U.S. diplomat, a general in particular, walk in his dress uniform, that brought our morale right back up. And not that it was ever too low, but we hit some low points. But we were ready for the long haul if we had to wait for a long time to get home. We knew we'd get home though. Let's
go back a few years. Let's go back to South Dakota and Nebraska and kind of a not a horribly tough life, but your parents were divorced. Your mom was working a couple of jobs. You were brought up with a pretty darn good work ethic.
Yes.
If anyone's ever walked bean fields, and I have.
Well, that's nothing compared to my mom's work ethic. She was working 3 jobs in Norfolk. We moved there, and I started kindergarten in Norfolk. So I was in Nebraska, and I've lived here since I was 4.
But before Nebraska, you went up in your first plane.
Sure. I was in Loomis, South Dakota. Our neighbor had a Piper Cub, a J3, 1940s wooden prop 2-seater that he took me up in, and ever since then I've wanted to fly and serve. And I just, my mom, when we moved to Norfolk, got a job at the Nebraska Veterans Home and eventually was the director of nurses there for quite a few years. And so I spent a lot of weekends and nights hanging out with veterans from World War even I, II, and all in Korea and Vietnam, and was able to hear their stories and firsthand and meet these great
prisoners
men.
And
exactly.
It's almost as if this was scripted out for you in advance. I mean, maybe I just have a flair for the dramatic, but I mean, seriously, as I was reading this, I said, here's this kid whose dad knows a guy who bought a military surplus Piper Cub and put it together himself. And you get to go up in it, and you're a little kid, and it makes an impression. Then you go talk with all these vets, and you get a real sense of honor and dignity and value of what the military people have done for us as a country.
It did. It helped a lot. And then growing up in the Midwest, I think was a major factor in my attitude on life and how we address and act to people and are civil to each other but straightforward. Things that I don't always see when as I've traveled around in the military. We're all Americans, but there's different styles and personalities out there. But that, I think, growing up right here in Nebraska gave me the tools to deal with any situation. If you can rely on your faith and your family, and that's solid, then the rest of your trials are going to be easily overcome.
But you had all the things that happen to teenagers. You had the worrying about how you looked.
Well,
was pumping up a little bit. I mean, all the teenage angst.
Sure.
You had all that stuff.
And it added to it when I had the car wreck. That was when I was really worried about it.
That's what I was getting to. You were in a very bad car wreck, and in fact, the paramedics thought you were.
They thought I was
gone.
Dead. Yep. We'd hit the back of a tractor. I was in the passenger seat doing about 65, and I flew through the windshield of the car, and it had about 200 and some stitches in my face. So
all you have is a little scar left
here, and my eyelids are
Yeah, if you
been
close
redone.
your eyes, but
yeah, and it was pretty damaged, but you know,
your greatest fear was that your eyesight would
I was
not
worried about my
enable you to
eyesight
be a
being
pilot.
damaged and not being able to get into pilot training. That was probably the roughest part of it, to tell you the truth.
But you faced little disappointments here and there.
Sure.
Yeah, you kind of you wanted to make it to the academy,
The Naval Academy,
Naval
yeah.
Academy. You didn't get that, but then you wake up one day and the Navy says, no, but we'll give you a 4-year scholarship to any place that has a Navy ROTC program.
Yes, so that was a relief, because we didn't have the money to, I would have had to borrow everything to go to college, and I still would have went, but this made it a lot nicer, and ROTC was a great experience. Going to the University of Nebraska was a great experience. And
You were a
I'm-
math major? I mean, you were
Math major.
you didn't get through on, the easiest courses in the universe.
I was better at math than I was at some of the electives, so that helped. But we had a great unit there. A lot of good friends that are flying all over the world right now in the Navy that I met there that I still run into a lot.
So you get through that, you make it through, and you've got a heck of a class load that last year in those heavy-duty math courses.
Sure.
You get out, and then you're they're not COs, but the guy in charge kind of gives you the impression you didn't make it into flight school.
My commanding officer gave me a fake orders that said I was going to be a liaison of some type in Washington, D.C.
jockey.
A desk job. And I kind of was hoping, I thought he was kidding, but I was so nervous about getting into flight school that there was no joking about it at that point. So.
But then he couldn't keep the
Yeah,
joke
then
very
he-
long because
yeah.
he knew you would be
It was
devastated.
Captain Delaplane was his name.
And then you get into flight school, then
Mm-hmm.
you find ultimately that you dream to be a Top Gun
Sure.
fighter pilot. The pipeline's loaded. Then you go to the next craft you might want to be in, the pipeline's loaded. They've got enough
Yeah.
of them. And you kind of went, and you ended up on this.
It's
Training on
you
this?
do as well as you can. And your grades. If you get the grades to qualify, then it's the needs of the Navy. And back then, our T2, the jet trainer, was down, so they weren't using it, and there was a backlog of almost a year. So you had choices between P3s or helicopters, and so I chose P3s, and I didn't know a lot about the EP3. No one does. No one did at that stage, and so I decided
It was the
that'd
next
be
kind of
pretty cool.
generation of that, yeah.
Sure.
So you ended up on it, and you got the flight of your life.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest it to anyone.
I think the little turns that life takes is that
Sure.
I'm sure the disappointment of not being able to be a fighter
Mm-hmm.
pilot and having to go wait, and you were just chomping at the bit. You just wanted to get in one of those pipelines and
Yeah.
get going, and then you are in a flight like no other, a situation afterward like no other,
Sure.
and you're Shane Osborne, and you you get the Distinguished Flying Cross, and you and the Meritorious Service Medal. And you bring honor to your crew. They bring honor to
They
you.
got the air medal. The crew got the air medals.
And now, Shane is got a book and movie coming out. But what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, after we returned home, it was a great homecoming party, especially back here in Nebraska. It was a whirlwind for a few weeks, and it was great meeting people and seeing people I hadn't seen in a long time. And everyone in Nebraska was so gracious and kind to my family and friends, and took good care of my mom and
You put up all those yellow ribbons while
put
you
up
were
all
gone.
those yellow ribbons while we were gone. So that was I got to see some of that before they were taken down. So that was really neat, and it was great. But the important thing for me is I was back up flying 3 weeks later, to get back in the saddle, and then after September 11th, I knew that I'd be sent over there, which I was ready and willing to go. So it was a great honor. I took the senior evaluator, John Comerford, one of my best friends, who was the head of the back end. We got a new crew and headed out in an EP3 to go fly missions over Afghanistan. And those were some great missions. Yeah, some scary missions. Nobody likes to get shot at, especially in a big reconnaissance airplane. But serving and being able to do something besides that was important to me, to let myself know that that wasn't everything. So we returned from that. Flew over 300 hours in 2 months, which is a lot of flying.
That is a lot of fun.
The crew received the Air Medal here recently. Our whole crew did, which is pretty rare for a Navy reconnaissance crew to get the Air Medal. So it was a big honor for all of us to go out and do that again. And the night after I got back from the war, I met my now fiance. So life's been good. And
Yes, you are engaged. She has a son and
Yes.
young son. And,
Avery, he's 5.
And you were heading off into new skies
Yes.
in that area. We only have a
Family
few
life.
minutes left. I told you this would go very fast. I want to ask you just kind of a kind of a,
Sure.
a round of real quick questions. It was mentioned in there that there were a couple of people in your crew that would write down Bible verses and hymns that they could remember. And I know you were you went to Bible school,
Yes, I
Lutheran
did.
church, from the time you were young. Were you a prayerful person before that?
I always prayed, but obviously this intensified it
There-
tenfold. You know, that's what I did. I would pray in my room in isolation. We prayed as a group together, recited Bible verses, sang when we could, when they'd let us, things like that to keep our faith, and we knew that there was a lot of prayers back here for us too. You could feel them, so it helped keep the cohesiveness and the morale of us high.
How do you look upon, and I'm not going to ask you any political questions about Iraq,
Okay.
but it looks as though we are headed to
Sure.
some sort of thing, and I imagine someone that has gone through what you did and turns on the TV this past couple of weekends and sees protesters all over the world. What do you say? Having been a
It's,
captive, having been in countries that
yeah.
are poor and don't have a good democracy, what do you think when you look at that?
Well, it's mixed feelings, but when it all comes down to is all fight and die for their right to do that.
And that's what it's probably
That's
a
why
little hard to watch.
That's why we're the best country in the world.
There's one comment from one of the Chinese. He says, "Americans are trying to take over the world with your arrogance." That was quoted
Sure.
in your book, and we're hearing a little bit of that, and that's
Sure.
around the world. Do you have? Nebraskans know how you feel. We know how Nebraskans feel. If you could talk to those people who think America is arrogant, what would you say to them?
Well, I just think we lead by example of what we've done all over the world, helping nations. We just liberated Afghanistan from one of the most oppressive regimes that the world's ever known. And I don't think we necessarily need to do it for credit. We just need to know that we are the leaders of the free world, and as long as we stick together as a country and keep on this righteous path and stick together and stick to our faith and our beliefs, that we're going to be just fine.
I know you're doing some training. I mean, you are a trainer.
Yes,
Right now,
I'm an
you be
instructor
the
pilot
one
now.
that
teaches them.
do you think that you will continue that for a while, or do you think you might see action if we have?
As of right now, we need people in the fleet. We need some young men and women to come in and serve their country and help keep us free, to take my place, as
you're training them even as
and
we
I'm
speak.
training them right now. So, but we can always use more, and it's a great thing to serve your country. You'll never regret it, I promise you. So,
Well, it's a great thing having you here.
thank you.
The book is Born to Fly, the untold story of the downed American reconnaissance plane, the story of Lieutenant Shane Osborne and his amazing crew. Thanks for joining us this week. You can see this show or refer someone else to see it at unotv.unomaha.edu. Shane, thank you.
Thanks for having
Good
me.
luck to you.
Take care.
Good luck with your wife-to-be and your new son.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.